So how did you find making the notes on it?
On the art of learning,
Yeah, how do you pronounce the guy's name?
I think it's Waitzkin.
Waitzkin.
Pretty sure that's it.
I was gonna say, how did you find out about him, or how did you know about the book?
Um, God, it was a long time ago. I found out about it when it first came out. I was a fan of the movie, and then I don't know if he was on Tim Ferriss's podcast. I'm not sure if I heard about it through Tim Ferriss because I knew the guy. I knew of the guy. I was like, oh, that guy's cool. Well, I don't know. I know I had the book like right when it came out. I want to say like maybe a year after it came out, 2008, 7, 8, and 9
Yeah.
in that range. Probably 2009, I think, when I moved here. So I'm guessing I don't know what year it came out in. But I read it as a totally different person than going through it again, and I had to read it a couple times.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? There's a book I think we should get to in our series by Mortimer Adler called the How to Read a Book, and he describes in there three or four different methods of reading. One is just to read a book for enjoyment. Another one is for information and analytics. And I think what it's referred to as syntoptic reading, where you don't just read that book, you read three or four different books, all of the same subject. So you get many different perspectives. And then when you go back to the original, you're just not the same person. And I kind of had that experience with this book, The Art of Learning, when I went on to read Dweck's book, Mindset. And now that I've come back to this one, I can see that this one overlaps with a lot of Zen, obviously, a lot of the mindset stuff. Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting, I don't even say read, but experience, because it just shifts your perspective so much.
Yeah, it makes a difference in the order you read the books too. If you would have read Mindset first and then The Art of Learning, it would have been a whole different thing, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, again, that's mentioned in Bo Lotto's book, Deviate, where he talks about the kurtotic effect. And what that means is it depends in which order you get the information.
Yeah, that's huge. I
Yeah.
remember one of the first books I've read, I think the first like personal development type of book my friend in high school told me about. It might have been right after a Tony Robbins book or right before one. I think it was the first one I've read called Powers of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Have you ever read that one?
No.
Okay. It's interesting. And I read it back in the day when I was like 18 years old. Actually, it was before the Tony Robbins stuff. Yeah, that was the first book I read. And it was pretty powerful. It kind of it's kind of just like about your subconscious mind and programming it and stuff like that. There's some things where they talk a lot about, like, I think in the book, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, it talks a lot about like God and stuff like that. But if you just like replace your subconscious mind or your unconscious mind with it, it works out nicely.
That's the point, I think, getting the right framework. Because when I went on to read Dweck's book, she referenced Lou Gerstner's book, Why Elephants Can't Dance. And I picked that off the bookshelf. And as I was staring at it, I thought, that's been there for years. I must get around to reading that. And I thought, bugger it, no time like the present. So I read it a few days ago. And then I got to the back, and there's all these handwritten notes. And I thought, that looks like my handwriting. I must have read it because some of the things that stood out that I'd obviously made notes on stood out again this time, and I thought, wow, that's weird. And I just don't remember reading it, but now reading it with the mindset in mind, I can see how Dweck is either taking lessons from Gerstner or Gerstner's taking lessons from Dweck. I don't know which order that comes in, but it's the same kind of story. The fixed mindset or the growth mindset. I think we should definitely get Lou Gerstner's book under analysis. It's a pretty quick read, but it's fascinating in terms of how he brings culture change into, and how he turned around IBM and how he aligned incentives, motivated people, and looked for. The first half of the book in Gerstner's book is more or less, I just sat in there for 3 months watching and learning. That's all I did. And then when I learned as much as I could, I started asking people questions to understand their thinking and how they learned.
Wow, yeah.
So it's all about growth.
I just found it. It's 8 hours audio book.
Wow, play it at double speed then.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like most books, that 8 hours of audio, there's probably seriously maybe 1 hour of really good shit in it.
I purchased the digital edition of Gerstner's book. Made highlights in it, all the important stuff in terms of mindset. And it's just basically all yellow.
You know what would be a really cool thing is if you could not only just see only the highlights, right? So export only the highlights, but then also export everything that's not highlighted.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing. I spoke to a couple of friends last year about speed reading because I did the photo reading course. What's his name?
Paul
Shield.
Shield.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did the Shield. That's it. I got it kicking around somewhere as well. Cost a few £100 as well. But basically, that Shealy course is based pretty much on Mortimer Adler's book. So if you've got that Mortimer Adler book and take it to heart, that is a speed reading course.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. You don't need to do the Shealy course because he wraps it around some NLP and hypnotic inductions to relax and teaches different ways of viewing text. This kind of defocused focus. We can talk about that perhaps on another recording, but I'm not sure of the merits. I probably didn't practice it long enough to see it, but a lot of the core concepts in that Shealy course are taken from the Adler book.
Did you get the like the CD-ROM to do the tests with it? I think that was the book. I read that book a long time ago, and it came with something where your eyes would follow the screen.
No, I went. It was on the back end of when I did the NLP. I did the practitioner first, and then 6 months later, I went to a different company and did the masters and trainers, and it cost a fortune.
Oh,
You
I
better
remember
throw
what
in
it
the
was.
speed reading with that as well, and that was a Shealy course.
Gotcha. It was
So
different. It was a different course I'm thinking of. I did read that book, photo reading, a long time ago. There's another thing that was called I something. What the hell was it called? And it was a play like not I think IQ, but I think it was like EYEQ. Let me see if that's what it was.
I see. Yeah, I mean there are
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, there's speed reading, and then there's photo reading, which Shealy's trademarked, I think.
yeah. InfiniteMind.io. This was really interesting. I did this a long time ago, and it basically I haven't checked this site. I don't know what this site is, but this is a long time ago, and it came with like a CD-ROM, and you would follow the screen, and it would move around the screen. It would train your eyes and your unconscious to see, I don't know, patterns and stuff, so you can kind of skim and just kind of read it.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
yeah. I mean, it is a definite practice skill, and that's one of my kind of commentaries with people who highlight and underline words in books, is that like that Gerstner book, every paragraph had a bit of gold in it. So when I look back at the highlighter now, it's basically all yellow. And I did that just for the purposes of when I go back to make an audio recording of the notes or talk about the show on the show. But if you highlight it in a book and then you open a book 6 months later, your eyes are naturally attracted to the highlighted sections. But presumably that's the bit that you've already learned about because it wasn't in your mind before. It's a new concept. So now you've read it, you've got it. So why do you need to underline it? What you need to underline is the bits you still haven't got. But of course, once you read them, you've got it. So what's the point? It kind of defeats the object.
And then if you highlight the whole book, what do you really do, right?
Yeah, same thing. It just makes it brighter.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about that. It's like, that would be a great idea. So we could you could see the highlights, the things that you liked, right? And you can kind of go over the things and like speak on those things. And then what would really be interesting would be to see what we didn't highlight and what we can find in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, dude, you know what I found like I read your notes that weren't highlighted and I try to pull the gold out. And then you read mine, try to pull the gold out and just see just the difference.
Yeah. Well, that's what I liked about Kindle. You could do that, couldn't you? You could put highlights, or you could read community highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you have a favorite point or a favorite chapter or a favorite takeaway from the book? Do you have anything that really stood out for you?
I think one of the things that stood out, is, well, obviously I've made notes. So sometimes when I was writing it down, because I'm quite visual, you're quite auditory. So my cues come from what I see. The notion, how do you pronounce his name again?
I think it's like Waitzkin.
Waitzkin, yeah.
I think so.
Are these the right notes? Yeah, it's the phenomenon that there's no enemy, that there's no opposition. So when he's talking about chess and when he's talking about his pushing hands or his Tai Chi, there's never an opponent. It's always about the dance, or what's referred to as it, which is the kind of emergent phenomena between the tensions in the two players. So it's always a response that's required from the other player to make the dance emerge. And then The way he almost seems to describe it to me in the book is when he has a game of chess, every move reveals the path, and the path is the game. So much like, is it the Tao Te Ching? The path is the way, and it's
Yeah.
revealed as you go, and there's no value or judgment placed on what is revealed or the path. It's just that is the way, but it's the interaction that creates it. So there's no kind of opponent, there's no enemy, because I think maybe I've said this in one of the audios, but I like Federer when he plays tennis because he's always in the zone, he's always in flow, and he always seems to be revealing the game. And a lot of his opponents seem to do frustration and anger because they're self-evaluating, they're self-judging, they're analyzing, they're in diagnosis mode, and they're not in play mode, which seems to me where you need to be. So whilst you're judging and diagnosing and analyzing, your focus is off the game. I think this is like a confirmation of that. When he's in the fighting or in the chess, it's always about feeling the emergent phenomena rather than judging or evaluating an opponent response, because there is no opponent.
Yeah, it's like in that flow state. He's just flowing, It's just yeah. One of the things that stood out for me was when he broke his hand, and he had how he uses adversity, you know what I mean, or whatever, to get better. It's pretty remarkable actually how his brain is wired like that. Because most people that I've met are not wired like that. They're like, why the hell this happened to me? How am I going to do this? And he's always like, it seems to be anyway, that it's always like a challenge, and it's more about the obstacle, you know what I mean, than it is about the end result. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think again that comes back to the notions of evaluations, judgments, and diagnosis, because it's like, now that I've broken my hand, how does the flow state change? How does the path reveal itself differently? And not even to say differently, because that's another judgment. But there's also a notion of overextending oneself, and he talks about that as well. Is sometimes the way to win the game in the context of the game, but being differentiated from an experience of doing the dance, is to imply a feeling in the opponent that they have a certain advantage that if they can capitalize on, they'll win. So that immediately creates a judgment in their mind, which is then a distraction, because then they start to see the finish and then them winning, and that's a diagnosis. And again, it takes computation time away from the kind of unconscious and immersive act of being in flow. And there was a video I watched on YouTube of this boxer where he's got his right shoulder dislocated, and his opponent suddenly realizes that his right arm is lame and limp, and the commentator's screaming, look, you can see it, his shoulder's dislocated. Oh, his opponent's just spotted it. And his opponent tried to use his left side to really attack this guy's dislocated shoulder, and he went frenzy for this guy's shoulder, but he left himself totally exposed and overstretched trying to do that. And the guy with the dislocated shoulder uses his left hand, wallops him, knocks him unconscious.
Yeah.
Wins the match.
Yeah, it's that making them appear that they have an advantage, like pushing against it, like, and then almost like letting them feel that they have the control, and they're gonna like, like almost like you made a mistake and they're gonna push you back now, and then you just take their own momentum against them and flip them or whatever the hell you would do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's interesting.
Yeah, and in that regard, I was quite impressed by the first chapter of the book, where he says that his parents purposely kind of kept him out of competition for a year or two and let him focus more on having fun and learning the game. So again, an emphasis on learning rather than winning competitions.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, if you ever, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the States, it's ridiculous with youth sports. If you really want to get sick to your stomach, go to like a kid, like we call it over here, I know what you guys call it, like Little League.
Yeah.
It's like, baseball with like from like 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds usually. And go watch the parents and hear them yelling at each other and screaming. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm all for competition, don't get me wrong. I think there should be. I don't think everyone should get a trophy. But Jesus, these parents, it's like they're trying to live vicariously through their kids.
Wow.
It's just really sad.
there's a video doing the rounds on YouTube at the moment. It was in the UK national papers, and the viral guys have got hold of it on YouTube. It shows 5, 6 year old kids playing soccer, and the parents close to the goal, and it's obviously his kid in goal, and one of the little kids is coming up to have a clear shot at the goal, and the parent sees it, and his little boy's in goal not paying attention, and then the kid only about 12 yards out takes the shot, and the parent sees it, and the little kid in goal doesn't, and so dad pushes the kid over so that he falls in front of the ball and stops it.
Oh my God. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he doesn't grab hold of the ball. It just bounces off him, and then the guy follows up and kicks it in the goal anyway, and the parent just shrugs the shoulders and walks off. Like, why do I bother?
Jesus. Then you got to reevaluate, your priorities. Like maybe the kid doesn't even want to play. Why is he even there,
Yeah.
I'm all for making kids like stick through things when it gets tough. You know what I mean? Some people, they just quit when it gets hard. Like, I'm not about that. But if the problem is, sometimes these kids just get put into all these sports and events, and it's like they go from one thing to another. Laura used to see this when, my wife used to see that when she used to work at a childcare center. She'd see like parents, bringing kids dropping them off to, the childcare, and then they go to karate, then they go to this, and it was like they were just like little kids, and they didn't have like any family time. It was just one thing to the next. Just ridiculous.
Wow, that's another thing as well. I only found out today because I was doing some background reading on this, learning models. Because I was thinking about the format for these recordings, using that one of the NLP teaching formats. We'll come on to that later. I think I showed you that before. But I thought, well, let me look up this guy and do some background reading on the guy who proposed the learning formats. One of them, I think his name is Piaget.
Yeah.
Piaget. Yeah, something like that. Piaget, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think he put forward there's like 4 learning stages, and it's like sensory motor learning. This is when someone's between the years of 0 and 2. They're just learning how to move their own body and having sensory experience in the world. And then ages 2 to 7, they've become what they call pre-operational, where they realize that objects have certain characteristics and can be moved. No real logical reasoning here, and there's not a lot of sense of causality, and that's why during this stage your kids are always going around why, because they realize they move, but they don't understand why or the causation. Why does the kettle boil? Why does the electric hob get hot? Why do you have to cook food before we can eat it? Because there's no logical reasoning in it. And then about ages 7 to 11, they have this like concrete operational phase, where they realize actions can be reversed. You can fix a broken car. They start evaluating things, and they have transitivity, which is a sense of order of things, things can be grouped, that numbers are ordinal, that you can sort things by size, you can sort things by shape. And then it's only from about ages 11 upwards that deductive reasoning comes in, that hypotheses can be formed and conclusions drawn, and that they can actually start thinking abstractly and make predictions. These seem to be limited by neurological development, so you can't rush the process. That is to say, until the mind's developed that level of cognitive abilities, you can't force it in them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, you wonder how much, whether it's wasted time, trying to, like you say, the Little League, couldn't you see the bases were loaded and the strategic decision and the blah, blah, blah. It's lost on them. They don't get it. They're not cognitively ready for it.
Yeah, who cares at the end of the day, right? Does it matter?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is it. A lot of it's for the fun, and
it's supposed to be, right?
It's supposed to be, yeah. I mean, I got into some bad habits with my own learning. I always thought learning must be hard, and therefore, whenever I went into a learning endeavor, I'd make it hard.
Yeah. I mean,
a very dangerous habit.
How were you in school? You must have been bored in school a lot, I would imagine.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I was always probably the geek in school. But what was interesting in the school I went to is when it came to the later years of the secondary school, the way they do it in the UK, I don't know whether they still do it, but back then you'd have core subjects and then you'd have your options. Like you could elect history or home economics or uh, English lit or something, or chemistry or biology or physics or computer science or IT, and they were optionals above the core competencies of maths and maths and English, and I can't remember what the other core ones were. But when I did my options, I took 4 science options, and they said, "Well, we don't like you doing that. We really like you to pick 2, and then pick a humanity, and then something else." But I was quite insistent. Some parents backed me up, so I opted for physics, chemistry, biology, and computer science.
Oh, wow.
So exactly, that's the response you normally get. But the big dirty little secret is that in physics they teach the same things more or less as in chemistry, and in biology you get to be retaught a lot of chemistry.
So
So
talk about drinking from a fire hose, right? Or then it gets easy, I guess.
it
It's
gets
hard.
easier. Yeah, it's actually easier because you get taught a lot of the same things 3 times by 3 different people. So once you've done one homework for one, and they say, that's biology, and then you go and do chemistry, and they say, okay, in chemistry we need to understand how chlorophyll works. Aha, let me just copy from my biology notes.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So it's actually easier, and that's a little secret.
I
Uh,
never, I, I never took it too seriously, like school. I remember my senior year of high school, we used to call them like electives kind of thing. I guess the same thing you guys call them,
yeah.
like classes you can take. And um, they had this one class. I grew up in a city in Rhode Island called Woonsocket, and it had this class called Woonsocket History. It was the history of Woonsocket, and it was like an easy class that people would take. A lot of the slower kids would take it. It wasn't like a acceptable class for accelerated type of student. You know what I mean? They would take something else, right? So um, me like doing decent in school, but just like didn't really care for it. I said I want to take 'cause a lot of my friends, I had all kinds of friends. So one of my friends said, "Hey, why don't you take Woonsocket history?" I'm like, "All right, that sounds cool. It'd be an easy grade, and I don't really care for school anyway." And they wouldn't let me take it, and it was really funny. They weren't gonna let me take it, and I had to debate them on it, I guess, and close them on it, and saying, "Well, I just don't think it's fair because you think that I shouldn't be taking that class because I should be taking something harder, where I want to learn about the city where I'm from." And I think that are you telling me I can't learn about the city where I was born, about the rich history of this and this and that? and and then they let me take it.
Wow, that's great. Is that were they? I mean, Watkins. How do you say his name again?
I think it's weight. I could be wrong. You might be saying it right. I heard it. I thought it was Josh Waitzkin, but I could be
Waitzkin.
wrong.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I'm saying it wrong. He may, or was it in The Death of Expertise? Reading so many, I'm getting confused now. Where, yeah, no, it was Waitzkin in his chess, wasn't it? It was talking about a lot of schools have chess clubs, and there's a lot of prestige around teaching the best chess players and developing their schools, and it's a bit of a burnout factory because there's always a new intake next year. So if you've burned out half the chess players
Oh yeah, yeah.
so they recruit the best and only focus on the best to make it so that the school has a prestigious and successful chess team. So it's kind of grade inflation by
Burnout.
not serving
Yeah,
those that perhaps really need it.
yeah, yeah. I think they turn and burn kind of mentality. But
Yeah, a little bit. So I don't know how, again, the question is, well, what's the incentive here? Is it to educate and teach, or is it to show the school can get good grades, which might not be the same thing?
well, I can tell you what education is like in the United States right now. It has nothing to do with anything else except one thing. It's just all comes down to funding, getting the money. So how do they get funding? They have to pass the test. So everything is written to pass the test so they can get funding. It's a really screwed up system. It's not about learning. I don't know if it's ever been about learning, but it's just about learning enough to pass the test so they get the money. It's kind of really sad, but it's all. I mean, they even have like everything, even like in kindergarten now, is to get you ready for everything's to get ready for college. It's just like college is going to go away, I think. or the not it's not going to go away, but the luster of it is kind of I don't know, dude. When I used to work at Apple, I used to work with a lot of young kids, and kids coming out of school with $100,000 debts for their degrees, working at a Apple store, and then finally getting a job and leaving and doing something completely different, making like, 36,000 a year to pay off 100 grand in debt. It's like crazy.
It's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I only hear snippets over here, so I don't have my feet on the ground, but I also hear, some are in dire situations and they'll sign up to a college, any easy course that's got funding because they don't want to spend too much time there, and they'll get the loan and then they won't even turn up to class. They just use it to fund their poverty, so they'll just use it to feed the kids and just then getting more debt, and it's not even about college or education, it's just getting access to the loan.
Survival, yeah, whatever, or not working, or whatever the hell the thing is. So in the UK, do you have a thing called like bankruptcy, like we do here?
Yeah, bankruptcy. Yeah.
Can you? I mean, here in the States, you can't ever get rid of student loans.
Yeah, I think it's the same here. I don't think discharge student loans by filing for bankruptcy.
There's a law firm out here in Arizona. It's called Phillips and Associates, right? I don't know how accurate this is, but I heard this story and it was pretty interesting. I think you'll find it comical. One of the guys, Jeffrey Phillips, I believe his name is, went to law school and, got student loans and stuff. But he didn't actually get student loans. He actually he paid for his college on his credit cards. And then as soon as he graduated college, he had, I don't know, hundred something $1,000s in student loans, but they were all on credit cards. So he just filed bankruptcy and they were waived.
Yeah, that you might be able to do that because it's not. I don't know who underwrites the particular loan, but sure. I mean, if you take out, credit cards is an unsecured debt, so forget it, it's gone. What assets are they going to seize? Gone. Yeah. What else? I mean, there was another thing that stood out in my mind as well, and that was to do with thinking and meaning.
What do you mean by that?
Some of the book crossed over with that other book, the Zen and the Art of Archery. Very much a Zen attitude is to be purposefully purposelessness, and the meaning is only really derived from the way you think about things. So when we think about things, we slice and dice. We chop things up into these linguistic categories or into chunk sizes, and then we can evaluate, compare, and contrast. How is it similar? How is it different? How is it same? Is there concomitant causality here? And that creates a meaning. So even when we have causal relations between concepts or entities, it means something. So it suddenly dawned on me, I never really had this insight before, that the meaning that we ascribe to things is a byproduct of the quality of our thinking.
Absolutely.
And one of the things it says here was that to him, chess was very private. And then when he started getting coaching and people would drill into, why did you make that move, or why did you go for that strategic position? He had to reveal his inner thought process, his thinking, and his very meaning. And he said that was a bit of a one for him to get over, to actually reveal his inner meaning about it all. A lot of people have resistance and put up a shield because they don't like to expose what they're really thinking on the inside, but the behavior, the causal relations, and the meaning kind of give the game away.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Also, like this term gets used a lot, but also the kind of state that we're in when we make the decisions, and also for learning as well. That's such a huge factor too.
I like the way Bo Lotto described it in Deviate when he was talking about pain and rash decisions. And the way he put it, he used like a neurological model where in your brain somewhere something happens and you have an emotional reaction and you get caught in this loop pain or severe discomfort. Someone said something to you don't like their tone of voice, or it's potentially upsetting. And what happens is there seems to be a mechanism that fires that says, I'm in pain, do whatever you need to get off it. So your neural network searches for the first thing that gets you off pain. And that's usually revenge.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so or anger back, or a reflection of the situation. And now that your brain's registered, it's off pain. Good, I've stopped the pain, but it doesn't stop to evaluate whether the second best decision is actually useful or better. So Bolotto suggests you need to slow down, take a deep breath, and search deeper in your neural network. Again, go to a growth mindset. What can I learn here? What's the more appropriate response? How can we both come out of this situation better? Because again, a lot of the stuff in mindset when we get onto Dweck's book is overlaps with nonviolent communication, and that's all about thinking in terms of meeting needs rather than judgments and evaluations. The growth mindset is what is here to learn. The fixed mindset is what can I judge? What can I evaluate? What can I... it's very egoistic thinking. Again, I had another insight about egoistic thinking. I think this was made explicit by, again, that Piaget's thinking. Mm-hmm. Egoistic thinking is, like a 2 or 3 year old child that does role playing, like cooking simulated meals with the plastic toys. It's going through it rote without no causality. But what they think they know, they assume everyone else knows the same.
Yeah.
So there's no appreciation that people think differently. There's no appreciation that other people have access to different sets of information. You think the world is like you. And I always thought that ego thinking was a bit of a prideful, I'm better, I'm superior, or something. But it seems not. It seems that it's just an assumption that other people think in the same way, that have the same perception, that have the same information, and therefore would draw the same conclusion about things.
Yeah, if you like things that you naturally do like easily and without any thinking, on some level you might think that everyone can do that, and that's not the case. In fact, most of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like it's so many people don't realize that a lot of their strengths because of that. They think something comes natural, that they, you just basically put the stuff in order and just pick one off at a time. And like, well, dude, people don't do that. You know what I mean? Like people, if that makes sense, dude. But like certain things, like how you organize things, you're pretty organized, you're pretty methodical. You might take it for granted that everyone can do that, but most people don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's an experiment, I can't remember. It's something like a small child's given a box and it has a toy inside it, and then they'll close the box and they'll say, "Where's the toy?" And the kid will say, "Oh, the toy's in the box," and then they'll take the toy out of the box, and then they'll show the toy, and then another kid will come in and they'll ask the first kid, "If you showed this box to the second kid, where would they say the toy is?" And he'd say, "In your hand," because they don't realize that the second kid will make an assumption that of course the toy's in the box because that's where it belongs, but they assume that the other kid will have the information that you've taken the toy out of the box.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gosh, so that's really sternly on page 1. A lot of emphasis in this book about the difference between a goal and a process, the ability to run a mental marathon. And I like that as well, where it says running a mental marathon, and I got this from Zen and the Art of Archery, that the target is an infinite distance away. That's the way to look at it.
Why infinite?
Because you never reach it. You never get there. It's always a process of continual improvement. And if you think about an archer, and again, he makes this point in the book that where is the archery? Is it in the archer? Is it in the bow? Is it in the arrow? Is it in the string? Is it in the wind? Is it in the target? Where exactly is the archer? Because an archer isn't an archer without those things, and those things aren't a bow, and an arrow isn't without person. So the point that's being made in Zen and the Art of Archery, which is kind of difficult to convey because it's like asking what is Zen? You don't even know it when you got there. So how can you put that into words? But he was describing the process of when the archer reaches this point of enlightenment, the arrow is loosed and the archer doesn't realize. Where's the arrow going? Well, it's going exactly where it needs to. And so, well, where is the target? Well, there isn't really a target. Well, where is it then? Well, it's in this infinity. It's kind of all one system. The bowstring, the bow, the arrow, the wind, the straw, in which the arrow will be embedded. The person who's holding the bow and arrow and looses it, it's all one complete system together. There is no isolation of target. Target on its own is a ridiculous notion. Something
I
along
don't
the
know, but
lines.
it's about like letting go too, right? Just like,
Yeah, something like we have this bizarre, crazy notion that we believe things don't happen if we don't do things.
that's cool. That's in the
It
uh
says wait for fulfillment or brace for failure, but either way, you've got to let go. Too much will for will. You think
yeah.
that what you do not do yourself does not happen.
Ah, yeah, that's the biggest thing I got out of that book was about just letting go of everything. Almost like in letting go of the tension, letting go of the expectation of the all that.
Oh yeah, that was another thing as well. The difference between assumptions and expectations is tension.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. So expectations have tensions then?
Well, it's the difference
Or,
between where you think your skills are and the expectation of winning creates a tension because the
oh
expectation,
yeah.
again, the expectation is another value, judgment, or diagnosis process.
Yeah, but how do you not judge? It's almost impossible.
Is it?
I don't know.
That's an assumption.
Yeah, I can assume, but like
um,
it's hard. Like it's like it's a survival mechanism, right? It's like it's an idea. It's like I don't know. Like I just is this gonna kill me? Is this gonna you know what I mean? Like is this gonna it's hardcore. You know what I mean? I don't care what anyone says. Like if someone comes up, it's late at night and someone's like in a hooded sweatshirt, I'm gonna judge. I'm gonna like say, what am I safe? What's going on here? Who is this person? Why? What's going? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's just the alley and it's just someone in a sweatshirt. Like you get killed if you don't judge certain things.
yeah, okay. I'll maybe go for that one. I'll maybe go for that one. When we get on to perhaps Marshall Rosenberg, the late Marshall Rosenberg, the way he talks about it is to work on fulfilling needs rather than being evaluative and judgmental, because the evaluation or judgment again goes back to this now what I can see as childish thinking, that the toy isn't in the box but you assume everyone else knows that, and there's a certain judgment. It's egoistic thinking again, that I'm the final arbiter and that I know best, and that because I've made this judgment, it infers that the counterparty isn't as capable as making that judgment, and that's why I had to do it. So it implies wrongness, and that's the underlying judgment that leads to anger and eventually contempt. And once contempt is reached in a interpersonal discussion, doesn't seem to be any comeback from it, and worse, if it's persisted, it leads to violence.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we can get on to Marshall Rosenberg, but he talks about what's alive in people, what are their feelings, what does that describe in terms of an unmet need, how can that need get satisfied, and once that's done, we don't even need to talk about evaluations, judgments, or diagnosis.
That's true.
It's just about what can people do. It's not about what you be or what you are or what you did even. It's about what can we do to make life wonderful now, and that's it. So you don't need to go into diagnoses, evaluations, and judgments.
I like that. I wish I could do that more often.
I want to do that audio recording as well. I really want to get practiced at that stuff because it seems
What
like nirvana.
the quote pops in my head right now, right? One of the best quotes of all time from the philosopher Mike Tyson.
Yeah,
You know the quote, right?
yeah. Everyone has a plan until
Punch in the face.
yeah.
So it's like that sounds so great, but then it's just like, yeah, I guess it's just practice. I guess it's like anything.
Yeah, and speaking of practice, another thing I got from Josh's book was how he describes learning the process of getting to be a grandmaster at chess. And I think there's a question in Dweck's book, Mindset, which he asks, when did Cézanne become Cézanne? So when exactly does a grandmaster become a grandmaster? At what point? I know the chess organizations give it some kind of arbitrary ranking of 2,300 or something, puts you in the ranks of
Sure.
Grandmaster. But what is it? What is the understanding that's required that, when tested, gives a result of 2,300? And the way he described learning chess is, well, he started with the end game first,
Yeah.
because he said learning all the openings just leads into a trap, because there's so many combinations, 2 or 3 moves deep, that you can be learning openings.
Forever.
That's
Yeah.
it, and you never get to the end game. So you can only learn then if you go that path. You're an expert in the first 3 opening moves. Great, then what?
Yeah. Then
So
if it deviates from that, you're screwed because you don't know that pattern. You can't think past it or whatever.
yeah, so he described learning end game first with just a few pieces and getting used to how pawns move with kings, how pawns move with rooks, the shape and reach of knights and how they interact with the diagonal movements of the bishops, and then how that network reacts to queens, and then how that network reacts to opposing networks. So you got several levels. You got the piece and the movement and the constraints, and then how other pieces can directly have influence on those pieces on a linear one-to-one step kind of course. And then you can have the kind of value added or additional leverage when 2 or 3 pieces start to create a network between them, and then how that can interact with networks of the opposing color. And then once that network is established and you start to see these patterns of networks, the whole game becomes one network that somehow these grandmasters seem to have a almost an intuitive feel for, or they can sense. And that's where the metaphor goes into the pushing hands or the fighting. You can see, you can feel the feedback coming from the other side and how the path is being revealed. And you get a sense of when the other side is overstretching or when you're overstretching. And that seems to be that leap of intuition or that Zen moment that can't really be described in any kind of process language. It's like a transcendental moment.
Yeah. You just made me think of something in the book where you just mentioned something about, oh shit, what was it? I'm losing my mind a little bit right now. What was the last thing you said just before, just 2 seconds ago?
Network effects, pushing, feedback from the other side, overextension.
Right before that.
How networks interact. How the opposing
that.
side senses what you're sensing. How you learn the motions of the pieces. How you learn.
Oh yeah. So with you're starting with the end game, and then oh, hold on, give me a second. The imbalances. You're making me think. I'm trying to find my notes here. It made me think of something. I just lost it. There was something I was thinking. Totally missed it. Sorry, dude. I'm freaking tuning out a little bit.
That's right. You reminded me of Lanchester's equations, though, saying that the imbalances. You know about Lanchester? It's a strategy used in warfare.
No.
Yeah, it's basically divide and conquer rule. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if 2 sides have got 1,000 tanks and they have a 10% kill ratio, that means if I fire my 1,000 tanks, 10% of that force is going to be devastating on the other side. So that's effectively going to destroy, let's say it's 10%, that's going to destroy 100 tanks on the other side, because 10% of my firepower is destructive. So if I've got 1,000, 10% is 100 kills. So if we start off with 1,000 on each, after the first round we've got 900 each, and then after the second round 810, and down it goes. But if I divide and conquer, and now the other side's only got 500, and I can restrain the other 500 through clever use of terrain or choke points, my first volley of 1,000 will destroy 100 of theirs, and then add into 400. Their 10% of their initial 500 is only going to take out 50 of mine. So I'm down to 950, but they're down to 400.
Gotcha.
So the ratio is now changing, and on every round, when you get to about the 5th or 6th round, you're at a 6-to-1 advantage, maybe even more. I can't remember the maths. So
yeah.
I was reminded on when Josh was talking about his pushing hands and the Tai Chi and the chess, that what you're looking for is a crack, and as soon as it's there, the game is almost inevitable in its outcome, because as soon as you have that first volley, and you're down to 950, and your enemy's just lost effectively a fifth, 100 out of their 500. The
Gotcha.
outcome is almost inevitable.
Like being down a pawn is not a big deal when all the pieces are on the board, right? But when when you're down a piece and there's 3 pieces left, just you know what I mean, or there's 2 pieces, it exponentially gets a bigger disadvantage. The least amount of pieces on the board.
Even that one pawn might be the critical crack in the game. And there was something else, a quote about cracks as well. I think that was from Dweck's book. But cracks are either points where you can lose your shit and things fall apart, or a crack is where you can put a seed to grow.
Oh yeah. So I remembered what I was going to say, dude, about the GM. It was about the GM ranking. That's what I was thinking about. And the difference between like a grandmaster versus an expert in the book. He mentioned how they chunk the information. Like the GM he consciously looks at less, right? Less information, but the chunks of information that he's put together allow him to see so much more with less conscious thought. So he can kind of skim the board, and he doesn't have to do as much heavy lifting, and he kind of chunks it into bigger chunks that allow him to. So he's looking at very little, but he sees a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the GM, what did he say? Like something about he has a more highly evolved navigation system. He can sort through his knowledge in a flash, right? He sees, the bishop immediately processes all the related information, while the expert still has to, labor a much smaller amount of data with much more effort. And so it's just like he looks at it more like an unconscious way. He kind of just skims it, and it frees up his conscious mind, so he has more bandwidth, because he can just kind of like look at it and immediately see a million things without having to really labor at the thought of it. If that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, that was amazing, because I think they said they even widened them up to brain scanners, didn't they? And they realised that these grandmasters, although the kind of attention was on the board, they weren't actually seeing the pieces on the board. It was almost as though they were processing a network rather than, where is the physical location of my pieces? Well, that's irrelevant. The question is, what network and pattern is establishing itself? What is the path here? What is the it? What is the kind of destination to infinity that's unfolding here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that was good. Yeah, and that reminded me of something else, but I've forgotten now. Probably the most profound point.
Well, another thing that ties into for me is the same principle as like Josh used to do. He used to, when he was early on, he used to like study, like when it was his opponent's turn to move, he's studying the board, thinking all these things. And as he gets older, to taking the time to, part of the book said something about being able to recover fast. So like, he'd not think about it, but be able to like Michael Jordan would come out of the game for like 2 minutes, put his head down, not think about the game, and he'd recover so fast and clear his mind, go back out there even though they were down. And the same type of thing in the chess thing, where he can just kind of get up and walk around and kind of like doing a sprint. He would sprint to take his mind off things, but like kind of like, what do they call it? Like that high interval training kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's how fast can you recover, and the same type of thing with how fast from a chaotic experience can you just relax and let go of the stuff and then come back at it with a fresh eye, versus just staring at the whole chessboard for the 20 minutes while your opponent moves.
Yeah, speaking of 20 minutes and moves, do you remember the bit that he said about timings?
Yeah, what part though are you talking about? You talking about the part when he didn't plan his food, or when he? What are you talking about?
No, sometime later, they started to analyze. He wanted to analyze his learning, but unlike a lot of chess players, he not only had a record of every move he'd ever made, but he also noted down the time that he took to make the decision to do that move. So he actually had his thinking time per move.
Did he write something about how he was feeling too, or no? Was that
I don't know. I mean, you know me, I'm very AD. Visual feelings just kind of pass me by.
Gotcha.
Maybe they did, but the point about the timings was when they analysed the moves, put them into a computer or whatever, and analysed the moves compared with the amount of time, there seemed to be an optimal thinking time. And it turns out 2 lots of 10 minutes with a break in between is better than 1 lot of 20, because at 18 minutes, you get overloaded and forget where you are.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So they reckon, yeah. So again, Eugene Schwartz talks about that in his copywriting courses. He sets his stopwatch for 33 minutes. Psh, that's it. Actually thinking time. Break.
No kidding. Yeah, well, the whole Padermo, what is it called? What the hell's the thing they call it? The Italian timer? The 20-minute block and then the 5-minute rest, and you work in those chunks.
Right.
It's a timer they call it. It's an Italian timer. It's like a Padermo or some shit like that. What's it called? Paderno timer. There's an app for it. Anyways, maybe I'm saying it wrong, but it's Italian. It's a productivity thing. And you supposedly work for like 20 minutes and if a 5-minute off, or work for 15 minutes, and then every 3 ones productivity. Let me see if it's. I sound like a fucking idiot now, dude. I think we gotta wrap this up soon.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that about myself as well. When I say, I'm going to knuckle down and do this after 2 or 3 hours, okay, you've got it done. But then I'm a wreck. I can't concentrate for more than 2 or 3 minutes after that. But if I be disciplined and break it down to 15 minutes, you can almost, 15 minutes and then a 5-minute break. You can go for a lot longer in the long run.
Dude, I'm an idiot. It's a Pomodoro method. That's what it's called, the Pomodoro timer.
Okay.
And they have a time management tool, and it's so yeah, it basically some of them are like 25, 5, yeah, maybe it's 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes rest, and then after the third one you take like a longer rest.
That sounds good. Yeah.
You work for 30 minutes, play for 5. There's all different ones, I guess. There's all different times. They actually sell them. Oh, looks like a chess clock.
Must be an app for that.
Yeah, I think it's called Pomodoro timer or something like that.
I did play quite a few games of chess whilst I was reading that book. That's what I'd do. I'd read for about an hour, play, make some notes, and then I'd go and play a couple of games of chess online.
That's cool. I'm terrible at it. I love it though. We should play. I'm not really good, but I love playing it, and I like it so much I don't even mind losing.
I
really don't. I mean, I don't mind losing it as long as like I can learn something from it. Do you know what I mean? We can share something, or like, hey, dude, what happened there? Why did I get whatever?
I mean, that was the thing that I found when I was playing the computer at chess. I used to find it frustrating because it doesn't matter if you lose to a machine. So I got lazy and sloppy, and my thinking was not sharp. And then I'd kick myself because I'd go, how did I get in this mess? I don't know what I did wrong. And without a coach or a mentor, the frustration to me is not that I lost, it's just that I didn't know what I did wrong. So there's no learning, and I can't work it out. So you can back up the game, and the chess.com, if you back up the game and analyze it, it can actually give you like a bar chart, step by step, move by move. Whether the power in the game suddenly shift, what move did it, what was a good move, what was a bad move, what was an accident, a forced error or something. And it'll tell you what the best move was, what the mistake move was. And then at least you know where you went wrong, and then you can go, okay, well, why is that a bad move? And then you can start to get insight.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's what helps when you play with someone that really knows how to play. Because before, like if you have someone like, why are you moving that pace? What's your thinking? And then you start telling them the thinking. And it says, okay, then like, where are you where are you leaving yourself exposed? And then just not, just thinking through those things where normally I would just move the piece and I wouldn't really be thinking. And then you can see, oh shit, I didn't even see that. It's fun. We should play after, dude.
Yeah, that reminds me as well of something else in that David Cole book on learning. I think it's going back to the 1940s. They had some learning experience where there was the experts who were teaching the lay people, and in the evening the experts would go off to talk about the lay people and their responses and how they thought they were learning. And by some strange happenstance, one of the lay people, for whatever reason, said, "Oh, do you mind if I come in and sit in?" And there was some stiffy coughs around the room, but one of them said, "Yeah, sure, come in." And as this layperson was listening to these experts talk about what they perceived the lay people were learning and not learning, this person said, "Well, no, actually, no, that's not what my internal process was. What I was actually thinking is this." And then the experts had a learning experience by getting the other side of the equation. So it was that cybernetic feedback. And then the next night they said, we better all come on into the evaluation process, because that seems where the real learning gets integrated, not actually in the formal presentation of facts, but in the afterwards discussion and the to and froing and seeing things from different perspective and the integration from many different points of view.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm about halfway through my notes. How did we do?
I don't know. I'm just we're just talking. I didn't even go through any of my notes, but I guess we kind of touched on a lot. I don't know. I mean, it's good practice for sure.
Yeah.
Making smaller circles, we probably should have talked about that. That's pretty good stuff. Investment and loss too. That's always good. We kind of touched on that, I think. What do you think about this? There's a chapter about the beginner's mind, and it said the goal of the Tai Chi match was not winning but being.
Yeah, I said it's a lesson. Tai Chi was a lesson in humility, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It talked a lot about the fluidity too, right? Like, but the flow of the energy, I guess, and
yeah, I mean,
just that's small adjustments. You know what I mean? Like, just very subtle, I guess. It almost sounds woo-woo. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense of it.
I think it comes back to like how the grandmaster looks at the board, doesn't see pieces but sees a path or a network, and it's almost like now there's no stress or tension, because, well, the way to reach a position on this board where your king is surrounded by my queen is to make these moves. That is the answer to this set. It's not about winning anymore. It's just about tweaking that network. And I think same perhaps in the martial arts. It's like I mean, I'm not martial art myself, so I might be talking out my arse, but it seems like it's almost a dance, and without the other person it doesn't happen. But whilst the other person's there, it's an interaction of the network of small adjustments that an ever increasingly smaller and smaller difference. It seems the more expert you are, the smaller and the more nuanced that kind of Lanchester equation starts out. So instead of being a 10% difference on the first volley, it might only be 0.1 of a difference, but that is the smallest crack that can then make a difference that can be leveraged. So it's just feeling out for where the smallest crack is in the opponent.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's really, and it's just about exploiting those imbalances or whatever,
Yeah.
Plus, he had an uncanny thing about like always testing himself, always like, investing in loss. You know what I mean? Like he would he'd fight against people that were like dirty or were just like most of that like that, and just like to get beat up. Some people were just like overpowering him, and he just kept, the guy that was so much faster, and he just finally would just keep doing it, get his ass kicked until he finally he'd learn and he'd keep learning. Just ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? If you put limits on your learning, because these are the rules of the game. You don't punch people in the throat, or you don't kick them in the happy sack. What happens when you fight a fighter who fights dirty? You learn an expanded pattern that encompasses the normally accepted rules, but now you've also learned a little bit for when people step out of those, and you can handle that as well now.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable how he didn't let those things get to him as much as most people would.
Yeah. It comes back to that Bo Lotto thing, I'm in pain. What's the first thing to get off pain? A reaction. Whereas if you realize that you're fighting a dirty fighter and all you've got to do is react, you've got to work out the pattern. It's not about getting angry because you lost your queen. It's about what's the pattern that's emerging here. How can I utilize it? So it says, utilize imperfections, create ripples of interest that carry us along. And this is critical for the learning process. So with a broken arm, learn to equalize it with a disparity. And then when you get used to your broken arm back again, you'll be at parity plus.
Yeah. I mean, logically, it makes sense. Like you think about it, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's just crazy how most competitive people in most sports do not react like that.
Yeah. So it says experiment with purposeful handicap, and then adversity becomes a teammate. I think I've written there. That's a source of creative inspiration.
Yeah, you don't have to have a bad situation to happen for you to actually do that type of stuff. There's another saying, I don't know what I read about, do the difficult when the difficult is easy. Something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. I
Yeah.
think
We're
we've been.
winding down then.
Yeah, dude, I'm tapping out.
Tapping out. Cool.
How long?
So
How long?
pretty good book. Recommended.
Oh yeah,
Number of
absolutely.
stars out of 5.
Oh, I'd give it 4.5 personally, at least.
Yeah, it was pretty good, and it was a good recommendation, and it led me on to the Dweck's book where she talks about the fixed mindset and growth mindset, which Josh labels. What is he gives them a different label, doesn't he?
Yeah, he calls it
Is it internal or entity theorists and learning theorists?
oh, he calls it like like oh yeah, that's it. That's it. Yep. Growth mindset to focus on actions versus outcomes. Also, I don't understand how as a 6-year-old kid he was so focused to study chess positions and could do that. Like it doesn't like make sense in my head. Not many 6-year-old kids can have that long focus on one thing like that. He
Yeah,
must
that
have.
blew me away as well. And he was saying that the way some adults win against children is by wearing them down in a 10-hour game. And I think, crikey.
Well, yeah, it's true.
You know, how can a 7, 8-year-old kid keep a focused attention for 10 hours? That's remarkable in my mind.
Oh yeah, unbelievable, unbelievable. Yeah. All right, brother. I think this is a good test run. I don't know if we keep it or not, but it might actually be decent.
Yeah, I think it probably could be. We probably think it is, but when we listen to it, it's probably going to be shit because we will have moved on and grown.
Ah, it's all good. It's all everything. One man's shit is another man's fucking ice cream sundae. So. Oh shit. All right, brother.
Yeah, nice one. I'll catch you in a minute.
All right, man. Have a good one.